Okay, we're on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. We did the Ibaylu, and we're up to Tashma. Second middle of the page. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. In this course of our learning, we should have the Beis Mikdash. Learning for Shleima, for my father, and for Naftali ben Menachem. Okay, so there was a conversation in the Mishnah between Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan. And Rabbi Akiva says that if someone violates a Shvuah, says he's not going to eat, and he eats. So even if he eats the smallest amount, he's chayiv. So he just said, no, only if it's gazayas. So Rabbi Akiva says to them, this is a unique case. Because where do you find anywhere else where a person talks and he has to bring a carbon? This is a special case where he takes an oath. Well, Yiboilo. Take a look at that again. Make sure we got that right. So, Amalei Rabbi Akiva, where do you find that anyone eats in a culture is chayav? Akiva says, where do you find someone talks from a carbon? Okay. So the Gemara question: does Rabbi Akiva hold in the entire Torah, everywhere, that's really a chayav with a culture? Culture means the smallest amount, no share, even just a teensy drop. And it's why we mention it over here by Yeshua, trying to say that the Rabbanan, even though the Rabbanan really could hold by Yeshua that a culture who would be chayav, even the smallest amount, nevertheless they don't say that. It's the chiddush in the Rabbanan. Really, Rabbi Akiva would argue with the Rabbanan in every case, but really we would expect the Rabbanan to admit here, because if the person would take an oath and in his oath it says, I'm not going to eat even the smallest amount, he'd be chayav on the smallest amount. So if he doesn't say anything, maybe it's the same. Maybe if he doesn't specify, maybe it should be the same. And the Rabbanan say no. So it's a chiddush in the Rabbanan. Or perhaps, maybe really Rabbi Akiva holds everywhere that you only chayav with the gazayas. And he holds only, that's different by, so we have option A and option B. Option A is where he argues in the whole Torah. With the Rabbanan, he holds like Rav Shimon, that's the opinion. And option B is that no, it's just a machlekes over here. Well, Tashema, come and listen. Damalei Rabbi Akiva, the sages said to Rabbi Akiva, where do you find anywhere that a person eats just a drop and he's chayav? This one's chayav. How do you explain that this one should be chayav with eating less than an amount that would qualify for the prohibition? So for the punishment. So v'im isa, if you're going to accept the first opinion, the first option of this that says that, what do you mean in the whole Torah you're chayav? So leimelo ana b'chol Torah kol Rabbi Shimon said, what do you mean? Where do you find? The whole Torah is like this. Must be that Rabbi Akiva holds that the whole Torah is not like this. Option B, and it's just over here where they're arguing having that much like this. Where it says actually that's not a proof because l'devrayim the Rabbanan kamerlo. Maybe he's just responding to them. He says according to me, b'chol Torah kol Rabbi Shimon, I really hold like the whole Torah, like this, but in the whole Torah that is kol shu, a mashu, smallest amount is five. According to all of you. You should at least agree to me in this case. In other words, the conversation, when it comes to, what does they call this, polemics? They call this, it doesn't mean that this is really his opinion. He's just arguing with them because that's the way he wants to argue. But that's not really what he holds. He really holds the entire Amalei Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan say, no, we don't agree to you here either. Okay, Tashema, come and listen. Rabbi Akiva, I'm a Nazir, Shasharapiti Biyayin, V'yishbay, Kedei L'tzaref Kazayas Chayiv. If a Nazir is not allowed to drink wine. And he soaks his bread in wine. Now, there's a rule by a Nazir, it's mistrust enough in what's soaked in wine, that you're chayiv even if you don't have a kazayas of the wine, but you have a kazayas of the combination of wine with soaked bread and wine. I don't know why they do that, but if someone wants to soak his bread in the wine, kids, maybe another kid. Okay, so whatever the case is, Nazir's not allowed to have wine, he soaked his bread as wine. If the combination of the bread with the wine together is a kazayas, he's going to be chayav.
They diluted it with water or something.
It would be the same, I think. It would be a kazayas, because mishras. And if you want to say that Rabbi Akiva always holds like Rabbi Akiva, then you never need a shear. So then what's this whole combination of, you see, this is Rabbi Akiva Aimer, Rabbi Akiva's talking here. Why do I need it to combine? Lama li'atzaref. Yichayev even without a shear. I don't need the bread to combine to make the shear. It was also taught in the Mishnah. The person says, I swear I'm not going to eat. And he ate things that were non-kosher. This, whatever, creeping creatures and carcasses of dead animals. Anyway, it's chayev. Shimon Paiter. Shimon says he's exempt. We asked, why should he be chayev for the shvuah? We're talking about he's chayev for the shvuah because he took an oath. He says, "Am I chayev mashma mehar Sinai?" Why is he chayev? He already took an oath at Har Sinai. You can't take an oath on something that you already you can't write. It doesn't stack one oath on one. You already swore at Har Sinai that you're not going to do this. Rav Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan Dar Mitavaya. It's a funny expression. You have three people here. It says they both say Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan. That both say. It means they all say. The way to do this is called the Isser Kailon. Isser Kailon means that he didn't only forbid on himself in his oath things that were non-kosher. He forbade on himself kosher food as well. And migu, since the shvuah is chal, takes effect on the things that are not prohibited, so it spreads over to the things that are prohibited as well, and it'll be chayav for the shvuah. So that's the way Rabbi Yochanan and Rav and Shmuel explain it. Reish Lakish Amar, it's 3-1. Reish Lakish says,
right.
Yeah, the mitzvah ela even farish chatzi sheva libder rabban ani bestam libder Rabbi Kiva. The Adam the Amar Adam Eiser Asmei B'Tolsho. Can explain it like this: say that his oath was either he took an oath that he's not going to eat even less than a shear according to the Rabbanan, or he took an oath that according to Rabbi Akiva that he's not going to eat, and automatically that means less than a shear. So when the Torah prohibits him from eating non-kosher food, that's only a kazayas. And he's prohibiting on himself more than a kazayas, even more. I mean, more prohibition, even less than a kazayas. So therefore, the Torah never forbade less than a kazayas. He's adding even less than a kazayas. So that's why it's going to take effect, because you don't need to say that he was including other things. Even in the non-kosher food itself, he is including less than a kazayas. Okay, now either it's according to Rabbanan because he specified, or it's according to Rabbi Akiva even without specifying. It's like that. Now, if would enter your mind, like that really Rabbi Akiva holds in the whole Torah like Reb Shimon, which means the whole Torah is always less than a kazayas. So how's Reish Lakish going to work? He's prohibited even to have less than a kazayas in the whole Torah. It's not the oath that's adding less than a kazayas. He's never allowed to have less than a kazayas. The answer doesn't work. It must be see from this, like the second option that Rabbi Akiva really holds, like the sages that say that in the whole Torah needs to be a kazayas. It's only by an oath that it's less than a kazayas. Okay. Those are prohibited. No, kazayas. Unless it's whole, unless it's a beria. Unless it's whole, there's other things. We'll learn in a second, but usually everything is a kazayas. Caleb is a kazayas. Sure. Yeah. No, we're gonna learn. That's a different story. Because that's not a kazayas, right? Amalei Rabbi Akiva, they said to Rabbi Akiva, Heichan Matzino, where do you find that a person would be obligated with less than a kazayas? You don't find that a person is obligated less than a kazayas? Reina Mala, what about an insect? Hillel and the Gemara have this question. Gemara says, very Yashani. That's because that's the way it was created, and because that's in its original form, it has the law of a beria. So you chayiv on that, even if it's less than a kazayas. Very hektish. What about hektish? That if a person has benefit from hektish with the value of a pruta, he would be chayiv. Doesn't have to be a kazayas. It says, well, habin and shav pruta, but you have another share. We're not arguing. We're not saying that everything has to be a kazayas. There's a different share. It's a shav pruta share. This is very mefarish. What about someone specifies that he's when he takes his oath that he's not going to eat less than a kazayas. As well, mafarish nami kiberia dami. That's when he specified. That would give significance to the item, just like a beria. Beria makes it significant, even though it's insignificant, because it's an original form that becomes significant. Very offer. What about dirt? Someone takes a shvua. He's not going to eat dirt. So usually when it comes to food, yeah, it's a kazayas, but dirt is not food. So do you say kazayas by something that's not edible? So the Gemara says, Ella, over there we say that it's even a kolshu, even the smallest amount. There's Ella tifshet by Rava. This could answer a question that Rava has on the next page. It says shvua, shlo offer, v'achal. Someone takes note that he's not going to eat dirt, and he ate. Bekama, how much does he have to eat? Tifshet, we can learn from this, how the kazayas, that it needs to be a kazayas, and we'll answer the question. That was Rava's question, does it need to be a kazayas? Do we say that only food needs to be a kazayas, or do we say even not food, because he used the term achila? So the Gemara says, Kikam Rinan, when do we say this? That when did the sages say that where do you find anything that's going to be prohibited and punished with less than a kazayas? That's midi de barachila kamrin. That's only on edible things. Okay, fine. So you don't bring a proof from dirt because dirt isn't edible. We're talking about food. Very kainamas. What about someone says kainam kikar zelai, which is like a way of making a neder. Says this item is to me like a carbon. It's a way of prohibiting it. And the rule over there is that even if it's a small amount, that it's still prohibited. So the Gemara answers, that's as if he specified, but in his oath, he said, I'm not going to eat less than a kazayas. Even less than a kazayas. If he specified, then everyone agrees to that. Okay. Amalahan. Right. Because if he went ahead and ate dirt, it's going to be chayiv. Now, how much dirt would he have to eat to be chayiv? That doesn't need to be a kazayas. Saying, but 1 second, but you said everything needs to be a kazayas. You say, yeah, that's on food. It needs to be a kazayas, but that's not food. One says, I'm not going to swallow this little button. Maybe that's a berry. No, but it's not a berry. Only if it's created like that. Okay, Amalaha, and if he said to them, where do we find that someone speaks and has to bring a carbon? You're asking me like this is going to be a strange case. Well, it is strange because where else do you find that someone speaks and has to bring a carbon? It's only by a shvua. And it says, "V'lai, you don't find that people speak and have to bring a carbon." Very megadif. What about someone that blasphemes? The one of those, huh? Blasphemy. No, that's the person is the blasphemer. What about what does he do? He blasphemes, or he blasphemes. So he curses Hashem. Yeah. So, and over there he has to bring a carbon. It says, Medaber Vaiser Kamrina. We're talking about someone that makes a prohibition. Yeah. Medaber Vaiser Kamrina. We're talking about when someone speaks and he creates a prohibition. Hi Medaber V'chaytiu. This is just someone that's speaking and he's sinning. We know that someone can sin with speech and he has to bring a carbon. Fine. But did you ever find that someone creates a prohibition just with speech and then he violates it and has to bring a carbon? It says Vari Nazir. What about a Nazir? He has to do that. Maybe Karban al Diburi. He brings a carbon after he I'm sorry, Vari Nazir, you have to stop over there. The question mark, Vari Nazir. What about a Nazir? He brings a carbon when his Nazirus is over. So the Gemara answers maybe Karban al Diburi Kamrinan. We're talking about where he brings a carbon because he changed from what he said. He violated his words, not that he kept his word. Yeah, I understand. He has to bring a carbon if he says that he's going to be a Nazir. But then his years is over. He brings a carbon in order to eat, to go back to his regular life. He has to bring that carbon. We're talking about over here someone that says something and then violates it. That where do you find that he has to bring a carbon? Behind maybe carbon, but this person is bringing a carbon. The Nazir is bringing a carbon so that he should be able to drink wine. Okay. Very hektish. What about someone that says something is hektish? He has to bring a carbon if he violates it, because if he then uses it for personal use, right? It's called me'ila. We're talking about that he forbids it only for himself. So we're really knocking away all the questions that we have on this. Knock them down. That we're popping up a bunch of questions. Hari kainamas. What about a kainam? That's where someone makes something prohibited on himself. No, it's not an oath. This is a vow. It's like a nether, where he says something is prohibited like a carbon. Kasavar ein me'ila bekainamis. We're talking over here where if someone violates the kainam, he doesn't have to bring a carbon me'ila. It's a question if it's considered hektish when he says kainam. Okay. So, Amar Rava. Now Rava comes in. We have a few statements of Rava. Amar Rava. Machlekes bestam. The machlekes Rabbi Kiva and the Rabbanan about bringing a sacrifice if someone violates his oath. If he violates the oath by eating a small amount, that's only if he did not specify. Very generic. He says, "I'm not going to eat," and then he ate. Aval b'mefarish. But if he says, "I'm not going to eat the smallest amount. I'm not going to touch the smallest drop," divrei hakol, because everyone would agree that that was his vow, that was his oath, and that's what he has to. He violated it. My time. What's the reason? Because when you specified, then it's as if it's like a beria. You made that into a significant amount, a substantial amount, and that's why he would have to bring a carbon. Amar Rav, Rav also says, "Machlekas b'shalayachal." It's only if he says, "I'm not going to eat." If he says, "I'm not going to taste," everyone would agree that it's the smallest amount, because taste means smallest amount. Shita, it's obvious. This is interesting. I could have thought that maybe taste is the way people want to taste, at least when the kids come to the kitchen when the mother's baking cookies. Can I take a taste? They eat more than a kazayas. So maybe I would think that when he says, "Can I have a taste?" it's the way people say taste. That's not really the way taste means in the dictionary. So Kamash Malan, that is no. Taste would mean even the way it is in the dictionary, which is a surprise because usually you say by Nadarim you say the way people mean it. So I don't know. This is an interesting piece of it. I guess it means that it could be used both ways. Amar of Papa. Papa says, Machlekes b'Shavuos. Machlekes Rabbi Kiva and the Rabbanan about the size is only by an oath. Abel b'kainamis, if it's when it comes to a kainam and someone says that this food is prohibited to me like a carbon, so then divrei hakol b'kol everyone agrees that it's in even the smallest amount he would be chayav. My timer, what's the reason for Rav Papa? Kainamis nami even the loy kamidka shma da'achila kimafarstami. Because when he says kainam, it's forbidden to me like a carbon, doesn't say I'm not going to eat. It uses the term eat, then that means it needs to be a share of eating. Less than that is not considered eating. But he didn't say eat. He said kainam. It's going to be also like a carbon. So then he didn't use the word achila. So it's going to be
Did
even
they
the
ever use
smallest
it
amount.
like Pesach?
Achila, and by like matzah, yeah.
Or what about like chametz, the kosher?
That's has to do with bittul. That doesn't have to do with eating. I think the chametz is iser b'kolshu, a big pot. It's not bottle.
Right.
But when it comes to eating, it wouldn't have to be a kazayas. It would be chayav. Okay. Well, Meisvei, where's the question? Shnei kainamis mitzdarfen. Someone says that this and this are prohibited to me like a carbon. And then he eats from one of them, and he eats from the other one. And combined together, it's a kazayas. It says, it combined to a kazayas. See already, we're going to have a problem here because we just said that you don't need a kazayas, right? This is a problem on our papa. Shtei Shavuos, 2 oaths, ein mitzdarfas. They don't combine to a kazayas. Okay, that's not a problem because we can say Shavuos is the Rabbanan, and where you really need a kazayas. But if someone takes an oath, it says, I'm not going to eat this and I'm not going to eat that, and then he eats both of them, so those are separate things. They don't combine. Meir says, Kainames kishvois. Kainamas also don't combine, just like the Shua doesn't combine. Bisal kadaya daitachnif went into your mind chaya b'kolshu, the way Rav Papa was suggesting. Lama lila sarif. Why do we need to combine it? Even if it's not combined, it's already a violation. You had the smallest amount. Damar achila. The Gemara answers damar achila mizu alai kainam. Achila mizu alai kainam. He added the word achila. The eating of this, to me, is like a sacrifice. Use the word achila. You entered into it the concept of a shear of a kazayas. If that's the case, am I mistarfis? Then why does it combine? Am I mistarfis? Safe. In the end, ultimately, we're asking on the Rabbanan here. It must be. You said achila. That means you need a kazayas. You said this. The eating of this is to me prohibited, like a sacrifice. Eating of this is prohibited, like a sacrifice. We said if he eats from both of them half a kazayas, that'll combine to be a kazayas. Why? He didn't eat it. He didn't violate it from this, and he didn't violate it from that. It says damar achila mishteyem alai karnan. Says the eating of both of them to me are going to be like a sacrifice. And he did eat a kazayas from both of them. Gemara says, well, you were trying to make a contrast between kainam and shavua. But if you want to make a contrast, then you have to take away all the other variables. The only variable that you have is kainam versus shvua. But you can't have everything else needs to be the same. So if by the kainam you said that the eating of both of them should be, to me, like a sacrifice, then the kavasega b'shvuas, probably by shvuas you'd said the same thing. And you say over here that it doesn't combine. So then amayim it's darvin. Why is it not going to combine? You took an oath, you're not going to have an eating of both of them, and you did have an eating from both of them. Rav Pinchas says, Shani Shvuas. Shvuas are different, even though he only said once, Achila. But it's an interesting thing that if someone would take a shvua, says, I'm not going to eat from this loaf, and I'm also not going to eat from this loaf, I'm also not going to eat from this loaf, and then he ate from all three. If he ate a kazayas from each one, he would have to bring 3 chatayos. No. Because even though he said one shvua, but because he said and this, and this, and this, he would be chayav for each one. Or two,
even if they weren't a shear for each one.
No, only if it's a shear for each one, he would. But because it gets divided up into separate chatayos, even though it's behelam echad, even though it's only one forgetting, but because of different shvuos, it's like different malachas on Shabbos. Because they're different shvuos, so he has to bring a sacrifice for each one. Well, what happens by kainam? By kainam, it doesn't work like that, because someone has benefit from hekdesh, and then he has more benefits from hekdesh. There's more benefits from hekdesh. He only has to bring one carbon, even though because it was all behelam echad, it was all in one forgetting. So since chatais divide things up, so therefore when it comes to shvua, because it's divided for a chatas, therefore it also doesn't combine. But kainames that do combine by a chatas, you only have to bring one chatas, one carbon meila rather. So then, okay. See, that's the case. Meir argues, right? Meir says that kainames are the same like shvuos. Bishlem shvuos. I can understand why shvuos are divided up and they don't combine because they're divided for the chatas. What would be Meir's logic? If someone says that I'm not going to eat from a kazayas, I'm not going to eat from both of them, by kainames, it's not going to combine. The eating from both of them to me is like a carbon. Why want to combine? The ate from both of them should be like a carbon. If you say that there would be different sacrifices for each one, that's by a shvua. So then it won't combine. And by kainamis, we're saying that it doesn't combine. But the truth is that it's not true. Because by kainamis, it would be one sacrifice. It says epach. We'll have to switch it around. Meir Aimer, shvua kainamis, exactly the opposite. That the shvua is like kainamis and it will combine. Someone says, why? How will he do that? He says, Leslie the Rav Pinchas. He doesn't hold of what Rav Pinchas says. That since it's divided for chatayos, that if someone would say, I'm not going to eat from this loaf, and I'm not going to eat from this loaf, I'm not going to eat from this loaf, he would have to bring separate chatayos. Therefore, they never combine. He doesn't hold of that. He holds that it could still combine.
Like as long as we listen to Kazai, it's okay. Like, not a question.
No. An after bracha on food has to do with being satisfied.
It has to be mitzvah.
Everything is mitzvah. Yeah. If you have a drink of wine, you have a drink from another wine, and you have a drink another wine, you have to make alagafen. If you have a half a grape and another half a grape, another half a grape, you have to make alates. If you have a half a piece of cookie and another piece of cake, it combines. That's because you became satisfied. That has nothing to do with this. This is we're talking about items that are prohibited.
Complete opposite.
That-
They say it doesn't.
Right.
That's why I was like,
Right.
in my mind.
Yeah, because that has to do with being satisfied. You learn it from being satisfied, from the Chalta V'Savata. Ravina says, Kikam Rav Papa. Ravina gives a different teretz. Now, we had a contradiction here between Rav Papa and a Brisa, which was problematic for Rav Papa. Papa's a later Amira. Papa says, Machlekes between Rabbi Kiva and the Rabbanan is only by a Shvua, but not by Kainam. By Kainam, everyone would agree that it's going to be even a mashu, even the smallest amount. The problem is we had a brisa that says that by kainamis it combines. It combines. Why does it need to combine if you chayav even for the smallest amount? So Kikam Rav Papa, when did Rav Papa say that the smallest amount would be chayav? That's linyan malchus. That's regarding lashes. If someone violates the kainam, you get malchus. If he has benefit. Kitanya, when did we say that it combines? That's linyan carbon, the bin shavapruta, because benefit from meila require the value of a pruta, the smallest amount of value, and that's different than the malchus. Malchus it gets for the smallest violation. Bringing the carbon, that needs to be an amount. So we've resolved the issue over here very simply between Rav Papa and the Brisa. Rav Papa is talking about malchus, and the Brisa is talking about the carbon. The Memra, but it sounds like what you're saying, Savri Rabbanan, that the Rabbanan hold that kainamis combine, yesh me'ila b'kainamis, that there's me'ila, and that's why we're talking about a carbon. Me'ila means personal benefit from consecrated items. So the problem is v'atanya, but we learned in a brayso. Kikar zu hektish v'achla. Someone says this loaf of bread is hektish, and then he eats it. Beinhu bein chaverei mal, whether he ate it or his friend ate it, they violated the rule of meila. Therefore, it can also be redeemed. Now, the rule with redemption means that if meila, in order for meila to be a violation, in order for it to happen, it has to be that because you're using it, you've removed it from its holy state. That's what meila is. Personal use takes it out of its holy. So if you can take it out of its holy state, that means that it's going to be redeemed. What happens by meila? You use it, and then you repay it with money. So that
the item was his,
he consecrated it.
and he makes it hektish.
Yeah, and then someone uses it. When they use it, they take it out from the holy state and they add back in. So which means that pidyon works. Could be redeemed. So,
and does the other person know that it's hektish?
meila is always when he doesn't know. It's always by
No,
b'shaygeg.
not the other person.
Yeah, it's always b'shaygeg. Everyone's b'shaygeg. By meila, this is an interesting thing because there's shlichus by meila as well. It goes back to the first person. Anyway, kikar zu alai hektish. If someone says that this is on me hektish, which means that this is not hektish, this is like a kainam. He says this is prohibited to me like a sacrifice. So then, humal, he violates it. The chaver laimal, but it's not his friend. The fikach in the pidyon, therefore it's not, because it's not real hektish. So there's no pidyon. This is just a regular prohibition. Like he takes a vow that I'm not going to eat this. This is prohibited. Divra meir, that's from meir. Now our problem is, the Chachamim say, Beinu bein chaver laimal. He doesn't violate meila, and his friend doesn't violate meila if he's saying meila b'kainamis, because there's no meila b'kainamis. You were telling me before that the Rabbanan say yesh meila b'kainamis, and that's why it combines. I have a brayso that says Chachamim say it doesn't. There's no me'ila. So what do you mean it would combine? Combine for what? Combine for what? There's no me'ila. It says epach. According to this is all a question on Rabina that says that it's combining to bring the carbon sacrifice, right? What did Rav Papa mean was the malchus. The Gemara says epach. Let's turn the opinions around to resolve this. This one and this one didn't violate mila because there's no mila de Reb Meir. That's the words of Reb Meir, not the Chachamim. And this will resolve our issue with the Chachamim that hold. We're going to say that the Chachamim do hold that there's mila. Okay, now the Gemara says Yachi. That's the case. Let's go back to what Reb Meir said in the Brisa. We're holding by where Reb Meir holds. Right now, Reb Meir holds that there's no me'ila. There's no me'ila. Reb Meir now says in the Brisa that kainamais kishvois. That a kainam is like a shvua. Kainam is kishvois, which means that it doesn't combine. So the Gemara means ela kainamais, when it comes to kainamais, it's terufa yud le'mitzdarfe. It doesn't combine. Ha me'ila islu. You're telling me that it doesn't combine. Probably meant to say that there is a prohibition of me'ila, it just doesn't combine one with another to violate the prohibition of me'ila. When you say doesn't combine, means that there is a prohibition there, it just doesn't combine to complete that prohibition. You just told me that there's no me'ila. When you switched it around, Reb Meir lost it. Gemara explains that the Brahim the Rabbanan Karmelo. It's rather Reb Meir, just in his argument with the Rabbanan, he's saying, Lidi, I actually hold ein me'ila b'kenemes klal. I hold that there's no reason for it to combine because there's no me'ila. But you should at least agree that it doesn't combine, even though there is me'ila. For Rabbanan, the Rabbanan responds, Shavuos ikka. Shavuos, they say that it doesn't combine. There are Pinchas, ikka there are Pinchas, because Rav Pinchas said that the sacrifice is divided. But kainam is like there are Pinchas, but by kainam we don't have the separate sacrifice. It all combines into one. If a person says, I'm not going to eat this like a carbon, I'm not going to eat this like a carbon. So then it all combines into one. And this, so that's why it doesn't combine. Okay. New Gemara. We mentioned this in passing. Amar Rava. Someone takes an oath. He's not going to eat. But he ate dirt. Pater, he's exempt because he didn't eat. That's not food, right? It's not really food. Boy, Rav has a question. Let's say he took a vow that he's not going to eat. He's not going to eat dirt. The kama, how much dirt would be a violation of that vow? Even is it because he says that he's not going to eat daita kazayas? What does eating mean a kazayas? Perhaps given lamidi the achli inshiu kolshu, since it's not edible. So then, what do you mean kazayas? Kazayas is by food. This is not food. Take him. Leave this as a question. You don't have an answer to Rava's question. If someone says, I'm not going to eat chartzen is the peels of the pits. Is that over there? Grape seeds. You're not going to eat the pits of the grapes. I eat them. And the big grapes have reputations to spit them out.
About food that's not food.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But here, let's take a look. But how much? He takes a note that he's not going to eat chartzen, the pits of the grapes. Even the mesachal yedei taruvas daita kazayas, since it could be eaten together with the grape,
Right.
so it would be a kazayas. Or maybe because no one eats them alone, so then it would be even the smallest amount. So take them. Rav Ashi has a question. See, before we were just talking about a regular person. Now it's talking about a nazir. A nazir, he's not allowed to eat grape pits anyway. And now he takes an oath that he's not going to eat chartzen bekama. Even the kazayas isur deraisa, who do we say like this? He wasn't allowed to eat a kazayas beforehand because that would be a biblical prohibition because he's a nazir. He must be taking an oath on something that was permissible. And what would be permissible is less than a kazayas, right? Less than a kazayas. And so it must be that his oath now is on what he would have been allowed to eat, which is less than a kazayas. So idilma, even though maybe because he used the term achila, which means eating, he's referring to a kazayas. Tashma, come and listen. We had this at the beginning. Someone takes a note. He's not going to eat. He's not going to eat. And he ended up eating non-kosher food. The Tanakama says chayiv. Reb Shimon says pater. But we asked on this. Avinam means we deliberated, heavy. We like sat on it. We heavy but. Why should it be chayiv? According to the Tanakama, Me'ar Sinayu is already been sworn into this before. You can't take one oath on top of another oath. The Rabbi Shmuel Damri, Rabbi Yochanan Damri. Oh, you see, it doesn't say Tarvayo here. Isn't that interesting? Last time it said Tarvayo. Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan, the three of them say B'koilel Dvarim Amatam Dvarim Asurim. It's when he's including permissible items together with this. So since Migu, right? Once it's being chal, it's taking effect on those things that are permissible, so it also spreads over to the things that are prohibited. And Rish Lakish Amar, Lakish says, the way we can explain this is if he says clearly that it's going to be less than a shear according to the Rabbanan, or if he just says in general he's not going to eat according to Rabbi Kiva, which would mean less than a shear as well. So that's why. Okay, now the one second. Nevela would be similar to Chartzan, because he's not allowed to eat the Nazir Chartzan and the regular person Nevela. This one's not allowed to eat Chartzan, which means the pits of the grapes. And this one's not allowed to eat Nevela. Now, but Nevela, people don't eat Nevela because it's not kosher. So when would you have to say that? Now, according to the Rabbanan, you would have to specify the time of the parish. You would have to specify that it's going to be less than a shear, halei parish. But if you didn't specify daita kazayas, and you mean a kazayas, mamina. We see from this that by the chartzin it needs to be a kazayas. Elatifshet by Rava. Then maybe this could go back and answer a question on Rava. The Rava also had a question. How much dirt? If someone says I'm not going to eat dirt and he eats dirt, how much would it be? We had a question: is it a kazayas or is it less? Because it's not edible. Tifshet the kazayas, then nevela kafadam, because nevela is similar to dirt. You can't eat nevela; it's not kosher. You can't eat dirt because it's not edible. The time of the parish, but you have to specify that it's going to be less than a kazayas. Holy parish daita kazayas. Then you probably mean a kazayas. When it says lie, it's a bad comparison. Afar lavar achilu klal. Dirt is not edible. Nevela basachila. Nevela is edible. It's just varyu dervila, just the lion standing on top of you, which means the Torah.
Yes.
Telling you not to eat it. Doesn't mean it's not edible. It's edible. Just okay. So by nevela you have to specify, but by the dirt, it's not edible. So maybe let's leave it over here. Okay. Shabbos, everyone.